Welcome in. It is the Northside Baseball Podcast. He is Jason Ross. I'm Mitch Woodmeyer, talking anything and everything Chicago Cubs baseball. We wanted to jump on today. It's been a little bit. Jason, I know you were on after the signing of Alex Bregman was announced. I wasn't available for that recording. Went back and listened to some of the thoughts you guys had on the Cubs bringing over one of the premier bats that was available on the market this offseason. And so now the Cubs have started to check some boxes this offseason. You know, we've seen kind of how they've retooled with the bullpen, which is sort of been the way they've approached it the past couple of years. Instead of going like big game hunting necessarily, they just bring in a lot of veterans. They brought back some familiarity, but they check off a big box with Edward Cabrera. They check off the box with Alex Bregman. And we're going to kind of go down the line today and talk about, you know, what could be next for the Cubs. Is there another trade that could pop up, maybe with one of the Cubs bats currently in the lineup or projected to be in the lineup? And then sort of our off-season thoughts to date. I did think it was interesting that after the Alex Bregman signing, Jed Hoyer said directly, and I quote, "By no means are we done with the offseason, but we did check some of our big boxes." So I'm curious, Jason, as this thing kind of carries on, and there are still some names available, certainly in the starting pitcher market, a couple of bats, but we've seen some of the big ones fall off the board now, obviously, and one of them going to the Cubs. What do you see being next for Jed Hoyer and the rest of the Brain Trust?
You know, the one thing I've kind of learned about Hoyer and the Cubs is that when they start getting connected to a guy, it tends to happen. It might not happen in the timeline that you and I want it, but it tends to happen. If we go all the way back to offseason last year, Owen Casey to the Marlins felt like it could have happened for Luzardo. At the deadline, the Cubs were in on Edward Cabrera pretty heavily. And what did they do this offseason? They trade for Edward Cabrera. Alex Bregman last year. Alex Bregman this year. All the smoke was there. Who did they end up getting? They ended up getting Alex Bregman. So when they kind of zero in on a guy and we start to see a lot of smoke on a guy, at least over and over again, the Cubs tend to make that happen. And if there's one more player who's on the market who feels like there's been a significant amount of connections between the Cubs and this player, it's Zach Gallen. Bruce Levine was on 670 The Score the other day talking about how the Cubs are still engaged with the Boris camp on Gallen. The Cubs made it very clear that at the deadline, they were upset about how expensive pitching was costing, and how they didn't want to be in that situation this year again, which kind of made it sound like, this offseason they were really going to load up on as many pitchers as they could get. I know that they're kind of sitting like 6-man rotation with Justin Steele already, but it feels like Zach Gallen is like a real possibility. And one of the things to keep in mind with the Cubs, they've been told, and it's been reported that they're willing to go over the luxury tax, at least the first line. And that kind of puts us in a very interesting kind of position for the Cubs, because if you go over a couple of $1 million, it doesn't really do much to the money. It doesn't do much to the tax. It's going to be a minimal amount on Ricketts. But the Cubs have Seiya Suzuki, Ian Happ, Nico Horner, Jameson Taillon, who will all be Matthew Boyd. All of these pitchers will be, and players will be, free agents next offseason. And I think you can make a case for almost every one of them getting a qualifying offer. Well, here's the thing. If you go over luxury tax 1, the next year, the punishment is you don't get a second-round comp pick, you get a fourth-round comp pick. So if you're going to go over by $2 million, you are taking 3-4 second-round picks, and you're turning them into fourth-round picks. Should that be the reason that the Cubs don't go over the luxury tax? Hell no. Should that be the reason that the Cubs go over by $1 million? Also, no. If you're going to go over the luxury tax and you're going to pay that, you got to go over.
Yeah.
And if you're kind of looking at the numbers to get to luxury tax 2, the Cubs are sitting at about $23 million to get there. And just so happens that Zach Gallen was being reported at around $22 million as a signing. So I say don't put that off. That seems like it's possible. My guess is that's probably coming with the trade. I think Jameson Taillon probably is on the way out. He's got a limited no trade clause. I think it's like 10 teams that he can veto a trade to. Have to completely look that up. I believe though it's 10 teams. A team is probably going to be interested in Jameson Taillon at $16 million. I don't think you're getting anything back for it. It's probably a salary dump. Especially in like once you get to like spring training, somebody's going to get hurt. And some team's going to want a $16 million pitcher. So I would say he feels like that feels like a thing that could happen to really kind of upgrade the rotation. That would be my guess. What are you thinking? What are you thinking maybe coming down the road?
Yeah, when you talk about, I wanted to hit first on the luxury tax situation. It would be, this doesn't just apply to the Cubs. It'd be any organization. To me, it's organizational malpractice if you exceed the luxury tax and have it foam over, but just by a sliver. If you're going to go over knowing what the ramifications are, which, as you mentioned, is those picks going from second to a fourth rounder, which again is not an issue if you're, I don't want to use a cheesy line, but if you're stepping into that box, if you're the Cubs brain trust and taking a couple of big swings, to go over it by, just a hair and still sacrifice those picks being moved back, to me, that's where it becomes a what are we doing here type situation. So if you go over it, make sure you're going over it by a healthy amount. So at least mentally you can say like, hey, you know what, this makes sense for us because now we're taking multiple cracks at this and we're over the luxury tax by an amount where it's just like we're going to be over it, but we're fine with it, instead of, man, we're barely over it. So that was the first thing that I wanted to address with what you said. Gallen, there was even reports earlier this offseason where I don't know who it was, but someone said Gallen and the Cubs, done deal. And then
Nightingale, of course. Yeah. Listen, it's always Nightingale. it's always Bob, man.
Well,
he was getting married.
Yeah,
that's the best part of it.
Speaking of Nightingale too, and we can kind of pivot towards this because I just kind of, I didn't want to necessarily take what you said and then bounce back my own thoughts and ideas, because I like how you kind of frame things. And Gallen is a name that hasn't gone away when you talk about Cubs circles and what could potentially come next. So I'm kind of in lockstep with you on that. But you kind of, by bringing up Nightingale's name, again, take it with a grain of salt. He said, we are recording this on Tuesday for either a late Tuesday night publish or a Wednesday morning publish. But Bob Nightingale said back on Sunday, I think it was, that the Cubs are not going to trade Nico Hoerner, that he thinks Matt Shaw will be the odd man out. So I ask you, do the Cubs enter this season after signing Alex Bregman? Let's just go to those two names because Dansby's not going anywhere. You just signed Bregman. You have Nico, you have Matt Shaw. Do they enter the regular season with both Matt Shaw and Nico Hoerner still on the roster, in your opinion?
I think it's more likely than they do than they don't. But one of the articles that got written, it was a couple days ago by Sharma and Mooney. They were talking about these. And the thing about Sharma and Mooney is that they write cryptically, but they also write very accurately. So you got to, if you're looking for somebody that I think to kind of listen to the most and the whispers through the trees, those two guys are kind of the guys.
You just gotta, when you read their stuff, you gotta connect some of the dots yourself based off what they're saying. Yes.
Yeah, you got to kind of fill in the blanks, but they leave the story there for you.
There's crumbs to follow. Yeah.
They were talking about how the Cubs value Nico Hoerner. Basically, they made a really good point about this, and probably something that we haven't talked about enough. But when the Cubs traded for Kyle Tucker, right? 1 year of control, he had been averaging the prior 4 seasons. He had been averaging mid fours for FWAR, right? And we don't have this. I don't think we have this understanding just how good Nico Hoerner is, but that's about where Nico Hoerner is. And the Cubs gave up a first-round draft pick who was rocketing through the system in Cam Ward to get him. Cam Smith, sorry. Cam Ward, former goalie for the Carolina Hurricanes. They didn't trade the goalie.
They traded one pick in the NFL draft too.
Yeah, that Cam Ward too. There's lots of Cam Wards. I'm thinking Cam Smith. Cubs trade Cam Smith. They traded Isak Paredes, who 3 years of control, and Hayden Wesneski, who fringy pitcher with some upside. They gave that up for Kyle Tucker, and Sharma Moody basically said that if the Cubs are going to trade Hoerner, that's the return. That's like the base of the return. That's what they're getting. Top 30 prospect. They're getting a controlled player. And so you find a major league team that is today capable of giving that up, you're pretty thin. I just don't think that there's really much of a market there that's going to happen. Could it? Maybe. Boston needs a player. But I think that's kind of if I was handicapping it, reading that article, they kind of pointed out that Matt Shaw had more value than that. And there's been some talk that teams could come looking for Matt Shaw. And if you're a team like the Red Sox and you're already having to pay Kyle Tucker price for Nico Hoerner, why not pay a little bit more, get the player who's not as good today, but has more control in Matt Shaw. And then I think you're talking something there. The Red Sox, I think, match up really, really good with the Cubs on that. This is from a Cubs perspective. I know that there are going to be people, Talk Sox is one of our sister sites out there. I know there's going to be a few people who are going to tell me that I'm crazy on this, but if we're being honest and we're talking Matt Shaw, what do you have to get something really good back? It can't be like a Wilyer Abreu. Like, I don't know what the Cubs are doing with the Wilyer Abreu. They already traded Owen Casey out, who had less control than Wilyer Abreu. So I don't really think he fits in. The Jarren Duran probably doesn't really fit in with the Cubs, but the Red Sox do have two young lefties who I don't think have a space on their major league roster right now. Peyton Tolley is one of my favorites. He hits like all the markers of just being a really, really good young pitcher. And yeah, that's a pricey price for Matt Shaw, is to get 6 years of Peyton Tolley back. But I think that's probably what you're looking for. If you're the Cubs on that end, you're probably looking for a Peyton Tolley. And I think the Cubs probably have to ask themselves, what is Matt Shaw worth? What is Matt Shaw down the road? Is he somebody that you project mostly as a second baseman? Is he a 4-win second baseman? That's a pretty good player, but it's a second baseman. How many left-handed starting pitchers like Peyton Tolley are you going to find? Do you hurt your 2026 roster a little bit that way? Yeah, probably. Do you help 2027 out that way? Yeah, probably. Especially if you're committed to re-signing Nico Hoerner. If you're going to go over the luxury tax, then that comp pick becomes less. Maybe you identify Hoerner as somebody that you feel as though is going to age well, and you sign Hoerner and you trade Shaw, and then you get Peyton Tolley on the back end, and as an organization you're healthier. So I would say that today it feels unlikely. This feels like a lot of speculation, but it also feels like there are probably enough teams out there right now that could use Nico Hoerner or Matt Shaw, and those rumors keep coming up. That, like I talked about with Bregman, like I talked about with Gallen, like I talked about with Edward Cabrera, it just seems like when there is smoke with the Cubs and we're hearing it, it's not for nothing. And the Cubs have had plenty of opportunities to basically completely shut it down, and it doesn't seem like that's happening. Sharma and Mooney have posted multiple times in multiple articles across the offseason that the Cubs are always listening, and I don't think that the Cubs are just going to hang up the phone on that. So there feels like there's too much smoke also for it almost not to happen. So it's like this weird space. I'll say it's 60-40. It doesn't happen. The players are on the roster. You always kind of have to side with the players who are here versus the hypothetical players who aren't. But it also feels like it's a really real possibility. Finding a backup infielder doesn't seem hard. They got connected to Miguel Andujar the other day as well. I think Ken Rosenthal or John Heyman. It was John Heyman. Put them that the Cubs are in the mix. Andujar makes no sense with the roster right now. Starts to make a little bit sense if you were planning on Matt Shaw being a potential outfielder, as they've said. And then all of a sudden you get Andujar, and maybe it makes a little bit more sense. And then today, Ken Rosenthal was once again talking about how, going back to Zach Gallen, how Zach Gallen, the qualifying offer seems to be hurting him right now. The Cubs do have a qualifying offer sitting around on Kyle Tucker. They're getting that pick back. They could basically send that pick back out for Gallen. And then it looked like he was probably looking for a short-term deal. Well, Bruce Levine said Cubs were looking for a short-term deal with Zach Gallen. So you trade out Matt Shaw, you recoup the qualifying offer pick that you get there with the prospect capital that you get back from like the Red Sox or one of these other teams that could really use an infielder, and all of a sudden it starts to make a little bit more sense. So I'd say unlikely just overall is because I never think that any specific move is likely, but it does feel like there's legs there.
Yeah, I'm with you on I like your angle of more so Shaw than Nico Hoerner. I kind of look back to last offseason too, Jason, where the Cubs trade Cody Bellinger and what was essentially just a salary dump, and then they trade for Kyle Tucker. And, I know it would have been a pretty clogged outfield having both of them there, but just the idea of like, hey, you could have Bellinger and Tucker instead of trading away Bellinger and then trading for Tucker. And now you're in a spot where it's like, you just signed Bregman. Now you can have Bregman and Nico Horner in the lineup instead of sign Bregman and then trade Nico Horner. Like at some point, it's like, let's not. I hope they just don't get complacent with this shuffle in a great name and then shuffle out a good name. Like, let's just keep it and swing for it, because let's remember the Cubs, favorites to win the NL Central last year, came up short, favorites to win the NL Central as of now entering this year. And you're looking around and it's like, I don't know what to like. I think Pittsburgh's still, a little ways off the mark. I don't know what to make of Cincinnati. I think St. Louis is still a little ways off the mark. And then you have the Brewers who
St.
are
Louis is going to be real bad.
Yeah, and then
they feel like they're going to be bad.
Yeah, and then you have the Brewers who are like the boogeyman. Like they might trade Freddie Peralta this offseason and still win the NL Central. So if I'm the Cubs, you bring in Bregman, just keep Nico Horner around. If you are going to trade one of the two, I'm with you that. And I'm not saying Shaw's not going to be a great player, but for what the Cubs need right now, Nico Horner is far more proven, right? We know what you're going to get with Nico Horner compared to Matt Shaw, where still we don't really know. We don't have that large of a sample size to go off of. If they keep both rolling into the season, I'm fine with that too. I got a kick out of the clip. I don't know if you saw it, but it was at the Cubs convention. I don't exactly know what the setting was. It looked like Nico Horner was just doing it almost looked like an interview you see in the clubhouse, and he was standing around a group of people, and someone asked, I am just slightly paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, but somebody asked him, after the signing of Alex Bregman, and there's you and there's Shaw around, is there a benefit to maybe some more built-in rest for you this season, knowing that Matt Shaw could bounce around? And he just was like, no, not really. And so I thought that was a cool answer for Nico Horner. Like, he just wants to be out there and playing every day. And he said, he did say in his answer that he needs to play every day to maintain his rhythm. That was his main kind of like the crux of his argument, which I get. So we'll wait and see, obviously. I'm with you that I kind of, were you saying you lean more towards both of them being on the roster at the start of the season, just slightly 60-40, you said?
I do.
That's where I'm at too, just right around that number. I don't think it's like a dead 50-50 split. I would lean more towards venturing to guess that both are there on opening day for the Cubs. But bringing Bregman into the equation obviously is incredible. It is the Northside Baseball Podcast. He is Jason Ross. I'm Mitch Whitmire, talking anything and everything Chicago Cubs baseball. What have you made of the offseason so far for the Cubs? Because if you kind of took the pulse of Cubs fans, and it always moves super slow. It seem like every winter we're waiting for like one or two dominoes to fall, big ones, before everything else kind of starts to fall into place. For me, like the MLB offseason with free agency is different than what we see in the NFL and NBA, where things can drag on a lot longer, a lot longer. Usually, like in the NBA, there's chaos, in July, right when free agency starts. Or if not chaos, you see some of those bigger dominoes already have deals lined up, and a lot of depth pieces already have deals lined up. In Major League Baseball, it can be held up by one or two big pieces. And I know at the beginning of this winter, when things were kind of moving slowly, not just for the Cubs, but for everyone, a lot of Cubs fans were kind of voicing oh, here we go. The Cubs aren't going to do anything this offseason. And you trade for Cabrera, you sign Bregman, you kind of retool the bullpen. Certainly going into it with just as much optimism, if not more, bullpen-wise than last year. I obviously losing some of those pieces sucks, but you bring in some good ones. So where are you at overall with the Cubs offseason and what they've done this winter?
It's like an A right now for me. This is a really damn good offseason so far. You figure and I think it's even more than just who they acquired, but how they acquired them. So the Cubs are coming off of a 92 win season. There's a lot of concern on Reddit, on Twitter, on X, on Blue Sky, on our Northside podcast, on our Northside forums and everything. And there was the collective pulse of Cubs fans was basically, they're afraid that the Cubs aren't going to spend any money. They're going to basically punt 2026, go into 2027 with, potential lockout looming. And it was just going to be a bunch of 1-year deals. And the Cubs didn't do that. Not only didn't they do that, they are acting much more like the Chicago Cubs this offseason. You just talked about the dominoes falling. Well, look at the offensive domino. What is the offensive domino that started everybody dropping? It was the Cubs signing Alex Bregman. It wasn't the Cubs waiting for 3 other players to not have a musical chair and then be left with the Cubs dancing at the end. It was you basically had a logjam of 4 hitters who were sitting on the market. It was Alex Bregman, it was Kyle Tucker, it was Bo Bichette, and it was Cody Bellinger, and they all needed a dancing partner. And
one
who
still
jumped
does.
that? Yeah, still does. Bellinger still does. But who jumped that market and got the other players to sign within a week? It was the Cubs. The Cubs went out and they said, fine, like this is the guy we want. We're going to go do it. They did it with deferred money. That was a modern contract structure. Something that I don't think a lot of us thought they were going to do. They attacked the trade market. They picked up Edward Cabrera, a very good starting pitcher when he's healthy. They've done what they needed to. And you can kind of go back to the beginning of the offseason where they were picking up guys on lesser contracts to make this happen. And I think this was always kind of a plan that they were hoping to make happen, to bring in a starting pitcher in Alex Bregman. And I think they've done that so far. And, one of the things that I think we can also take in is, Jed said that they checked off some of the big boxes, but does that mean there's a big box left? I don't know what the big box is, but this is the way that you want to see a market like the Cubs attack after a 92 win season. This is the way that you wanted to do that. So I'm going to give it an A right now. I generally like where we're at. Offensively, they're deep as can be. They couldn't be any deeper. Dansby Swanson is your projected 9 hitter going into next season. And I know Swanson isn't like the best hitter that you could imagine. And I think sometimes we feel as though he's, maybe not as good of a hitter as we would like him to be. But I'm just pulling this up right now because his ex-WOBA last year was 344. And just to put that in perspective, like if he would have hit his ex-WOBA, he would have been the 46th best hitter in baseball. That's your 9 hitter. And there's lots of things that go into ex-WOBA. So I'm not going to sit here and say he's the 44th best hitter in baseball. What I'm trying to say is like he underperformed his advanced metrics, which tells you there could be some improvement there. That's your worst hitter that you're going to start every day. And so, and I know that there's probably like a fear like, oh, with the Cubs losing Kyle Tucker, they don't have a big hitter. Okay, they don't have a big hitter, except yes, they do. They have Michael Busch, who was like a top 10 RC plus hitter in baseball. He was ninth best hitter in baseball last year. Cubs have that guy, so you can't tell me they don't have a big hitter. They have depth. They've got a big hitter. They've got left-handed power. They've got right-handed power. They're not going to strike out. They've got a pitching staff that's really deep right now. I know it's kind of questionable as to like who's the guy. Is it Cade? Is it Edward Cabrera? How many innings are you guys getting out of these guys? Yeah, I get it. Questions. I think you can question each individual, but I think when you look at the staff as a whole, you're going into this season with Shota Imanaga as your 5th best starting pitcher, like off the bat. Maybe he's your 6th best starting pitcher. That's a guy you had an opening day last year. So you look at the bullpen. The bullpen probably isn't any worse than we last saw it in October. It's deep. There's a lot of guys who are really interesting. Matt Trueblood wrote a really, really fascinating article over a reliever they just signed off of Tread today. And that is Trent Thornton. He's pitched with the Mariners. He's been a good player. Tread Athletics is where Tyler Zombro was. So there's like a good bullpen. And then, you still got the potential where you're like adding Zach Gallen to this like kind of like mess of pitching. Maybe you trade Matt Shaw in and
good mess.
Yeah, good mess. Like it's not a bad mess. It's a good mess. Like this, like I'm saying mess is in like I should say mass. There's lots. It's deep. They're very deep right now. They've got a much better bench as of right now. We'll see what happens if they trade Shaw or Horner and what that looks like. But I give it an A. I'm not going to give it an A plus. Not yet. I want to see what the rest goes. But I think if you told somebody on January 20th this would be the outcome, there wouldn't have been anybody upset in November and December. And so I think we've kind of gotten past that animosity, that fear, and the Cubs. Like I said, I'm going to give them a little bit of credit for acting like the Cubs for once. If you want to still say that the Cubs could have still signed Kyle Tucker, yeah, you're damn right they could have. But we also know what the Ricketts aren't going to put a $300 million salary out there this year. So, living in reality world where kind of like this is like where our best case scenario is. Yeah, I think this probably isn't best case scenario for the offseason quite yet, but it's pretty close, at least in my book. This is a good offseason.
Yeah, it went for me, Jason, from what are they going to do? What's the plan here? And not knowing how big the swings were going to be, or if they were just going to kind of add on the margins and then sort of cross their fingers. Like, are they going to go into this trusting Matt Shaw to be an everyday player, Owen Casey to be an everyday player? Like, what does this look like? And they made the trade for Cabrera, and I'm like, okay, that's a heck of a start. You're making a splash there. Like, you're absolutely making a splash. That's a guy who could slot into your rotation at number 2 or number 3. I think most people believe that. And then to go out and do the Bregman deal. And when they did the Bregman deal, they sort of took things and ran with it. And it was kind of what you alluded to earlier. They took the initiative to say, there's really 4 names here when it comes to bats in this free agency class. And they went out and sort of set the tone by saying, you know what, we'll take Bregman. When the tea leaves I was kind of gathering and reading online from reports, it seemed like, man, if Boston just ponies up the money, like Alex Bregman's going to be with the Red Sox for the next 5 or 6 years. And for the Cubs to one up that, and again, it wasn't like the Cubs waited and were like, well, let's see what happens with a couple of these guys. Let's see what happens with Tucker or Bichette or Bellinger or Bregman, and then go from there. The Cubs are like, okay, we have an opportunity to pounce here. We're going to open up the checkbook and do it. And they bring in Bregman, and then you mentioned those 2 other dominoes fall shortly thereafter with Bichette to the Mets and Tucker to the Dodgers. I just think the Cubs taking the initiative to not really mess around or kind of twiddle their thumbs and to do that with Bregman was awesome to see. Like, it really was. It felt different than past off seasons with how the Cubs have added pieces of the puzzle together. So I've been very pleased with the off season as well. And I'll be honest, like, the names that they've added in the bullpen, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Like, maybe not, but like, I'm interested to see Phil Maton, and I'm interested to see Hobie Milner back with Craig Counsell as his manager. Like, I've liked, those are the moves that they've made sort of on the margins with the bullpen, but then to also take a couple of these big boy moves and step up and deliver with Bregman and Cabrera. I think, like, all around, if anyone grades this offseason so far as, below like a B, I'd be like, I just don't see it that way. To me, it's got to be like almost B+ or higher. Like, if someone told me I graded as a B or a B+, I'd be like, yeah, I could see that. If you said A-, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. If anyone's like, I don't know, I'm kind of in that C range, that's where I'd be like, man, what more did you expect? Yeah, exactly. Because I think it's been pretty damn good for the Cubs so far. And I'm hyper focused too on the moves they've made and how does this help the Cubs win the NL Central, because I don't want to zoom out and I don't want to pay any attention to the Dodgers getting Edwin Diaz and Kyle. Like, I just want to focus on the Cubs, and hey, these moves that you made should put you in even a better position to try to get back to the mountaintop within your own division this year. And to me, getting Cabrera, getting Bregman, adding on the margins and then some, maybe saying adding on the margins with a Maton and a Milner and the other moves they've made is a bit disrespectful to them. It's not meant to be. Hunter Harvey was another one of those names too. But those are just the moves they've made sort of on the edges, I would say, that I like. So I think the Cubs are putting themselves in a great spot to hopefully win the NL Central, because as we said, I think the Cardinals are a mess. I don't think the Pirates are there. The Reds are kind of like a wild card to me a little bit. It's not a wild card team, like a wild card, and I don't know what to necessarily make of it. And then the Brewers are just, like I said, the boogeyman. Like, if I were a Brewers fan, I'll pivot for one quick second because I don't want to get too far off track. You just eliminated the Cubs in the postseason. Your team was 4 wins away from the World Series, and they've done nothing this offseason. If anything, they're going to trade the ace of their staff. Like, if I were a Brewers fan, I'd be pretty ticked off. And then you're looking at your rival adding a Bregman, a Cabrera, and these names to the bullpen. Like, if I were a Brewers fan, I would be pretty pissed. But for the Cubs, I would bundle it up as saying anyone who has this below a B, I can't see the logic of grading this offseason anywhere below that. And even a B to me is like a stretch. Like, I put it in that B+, A- range, right around there. It's been really, really good.
Yeah, that's about where I'm at. And, I would have told you probably a month ago, I would have been a little bit hesitant at Alex Bregman. But I've done some work kind of behind the scenes on, like, Bregman's aging curve. I've read about how the Cubs view him. If you're Sharman Mooney guy, they basically have alluded to it. The Cubs adore this guy, and modeling, like they model this guy out to like age incredibly gracefully. There was a great study on players who have similar kind of like backgrounds and like player profiles as Alex Bregman as well that I saw. And I can't remember whose it was, but basically like it looks really good for what Bregman does. And then you just listen to the guy talk, and
yeah.
And I know that there are a lot of people. I think Kyle Tucker kind of rubs people the wrong way in that aspect, and I don't think that's fair to Kyle Tucker. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. He doesn't rub me the wrong way. He's just
different personality.
He's just a chill dude, right? But it's also kind of, it's hard to get like excited when Kyle Tucker talks. Again, that's not a negative thing. Some people are chill dudes. We need some chill dudes in the world. But Bregman, I mean, basically just showed up and was like, listen, I picked the number because we're going to win the World Series. I'm winning the third World Series. Like, I don't lose baseball games. Like, I'm here to win. And that kind of attitude is infectious. And, if you're going to hitch your wagon to somebody for 5 years, right, you want to hitch your wagon to somebody like Alex Bregman, the way he talks, the way he cares about winning, because, I think it was Bert's on Northside who said you can't cheat death, but like if you're going to cheat death, like that kind of attitude's the way that you got to be if you're going to do it. Like, you're going to be at the top of your game, and everything like that. So like the more I've talked, like I've heard him talk, and I've done research on like his kind of style of play and how that's going to age. I think it's a great deal. And then you kind of compare it to like, all right, Bo Bichette basically is on a 1-year, $42 million contract. You want Bo Bichette, go sign him again next year. Like pair him with Bregman, have both. The Kyle Tucker making $60 million next year. Like, get your bag, baby. But like, that's a lot. He's going to be basically on a 2-year, $120 million deal. You start to look at the Bregman deal, $30 million for 5 years. It's actually like, not only do I think he's a good player, but like contract wise, that feels like a really good contract when you compare it to the other options out there. So I'm more excited than I thought I was going to be. I really thought I was going to be more tepid on Alex Bregman than when I actually dove into it. And the more I kind of do work on Alex Bregman, the more I think he's great, and I can kind of start to see what the Cubs saw in him, because clearly they saw like the guy, right? This is like their championship piece. I think I talked about it with Brock the last time we talked, but this feels like John Lester in kind of a way. Ooh. It's like the Cubs, like in 2015, and it was probably a year. I think the Cubs are probably a year advanced where they were in 2015 when they signed John Lester. But like John Lester was like signed for two reasons. He was signed because he was a great player, but also the dude that he was going to be was like the championship piece, right? You had to have John Lester. You had to have this personality on the team. This is the swizzle stick that's going to stir the drink, right? You got to have this. If you don't have John Lester, you don't have that personality aspect of it. And it feels like Alex Bregman kind of fits that same role. He's coming in around the same age, 31, 32. He's going to be here till about 36, 37, 37, 38. Same thing with John Lester, kind of their last big contract. They're coming in from Boston. Bregman was only in Boston for a year, but they've got like championship pedigree, and they have that like drive. And it just kind of feels like Jed Hoyer saying like, all right, like this is the guy. This is who I'm like gonna be known for is the Alex Bregman thing. And I think that just watching Jed pick a guy feels good. We've talked about that. He didn't pick a guy before, and if this is the guy that you want, I'm glad that you went out and you got him. I'm glad you passed on the deferred money. You didn't care about it. I'm glad that you beat Boston for it. You basically called their bluff based on the way that the contract went. You let them call the Bregman's bluff, and Bregman wasn't bluffing. The Cubs had an offer out there for him. So I'm just really excited for it. I wish opening day was tomorrow because I'd love to see him play. But I don't know. I have to say, I didn't think I was going to be this excited about Bregman. I'm far more excited than I thought I was going to be.
And how cool is it that this was a player they were enamored with a year ago, and he ends up going to Boston, and now a year later the Cubs kick the tires on it again, more aggressive, get the winning bid, I guess, if you want to phrase it that way, to get Bregman to ink a deal with the Cubs. I just, across the board, if regardless of how people feel about the player, because I'm sure there are some out there that are like, I'm not that crazy about Alex Bregman. Again, the process to which how the Cubs have operated this offseason makes me believe that it can be no lower than like a B for a grade, because they've been aggressive starting pitching with a trade, bullpen tinkering around the edges, and then getting that one of those 4 bats that you mentioned. And just briefly, because you brought it up, the Bo Bichette deal to the Mets, did you view that as a panic move because they lost out on Tucker?
Yeah, I kind of felt like it.
Okay.
I mean, it really kind of
That's what it felt like to me.
And you can, like, if you read the Phillies, like Dom Dabrowski was talking about it today, the Phillies president of ops, and it was basically like he thought it was a done deal. Like they thought they had Bichette. And then it kind of feels like the Mets came in and were like, we didn't get Tucker because Tucker kind of spurned us to go to the Dodgers last minute. I don't know. How do we fix this? What about this? I mean, it is a sweetheart deal for Bo Bichette.
And he's a good player. I didn't mean a panic move like, my God, they got Bo Bichette. It's panic in terms of,
I mean, you can read
how
it
the
in
deal
the
is structured. Yeah, how the deal is structured, and the fact that they thought they were getting Kyle Tucker. Like, Cohen was tweeting things out about, like, let me know when you see the smoke, like the Pope signal thing. Like, he was sending out tweets, and I feel like you can't send those out unless you're pretty damn sure you're getting the player, and the player that everyone was talking about for them was Kyle Tucker. And then he goes to the Dodgers, and literally less than 24 hours later, boom, the Mets Bo Bichette. So to me, like, and then you see the structure of the deal, I'm like, oh, this, like, they got a good player in Bo Bichette, but this felt like a rushed panic. We need to pivot to something else to save face type of move by the Mets.
Yeah,
that's what it felt like to me.
Oh, it felt like it, and it reads like it. A 3-year deal structured with an opt out every year at 40 whatever million. That is a we need a player deal. You couldn't have made it sweeter. I mean, I don't think that there is, going into the offseason, I don't think we would have found any. Like, if you would have said, what's the best deal out, like Bo Bichette could sign, like the best, most player-friendly deal that's realistic, I don't think we would have come up with anything more realistic than you make $42 million a year for the next 3 years, opt out whenever you want to at ages 28, 29, or 30, and go at it again. Like, basically, like, it is as sweet of a deal as possible. He breaks his leg tomorrow, doesn't play a baseball game this year. He's going to make $42 million next year. He's going to come back. He's going to be fine the next year. He's going to make another $42 million. He's going to opt out at the age of 29. He's going to sign another 10-year deal. He was almost like no downside for Bo Bichette. So, like, no shade to the Mets. Like, do what you need to do. 100%. Act like a big market. Go get your player. But it definitely was more of a, I thought this was going to be my bride, but now you're my bride type of a situation. And it feels like the Phillies felt the same way too.
Anything else you want to wrap up on? Cubs related? Anything else related? I know at the time of recording this, I'm seeing that Carlos Beltran and Andrew Jones elected to the Hall of Fame. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, baseball, if we're talking like baseball wise only, both of those players deserve it. Andrew Jones kind of comes with a whole extra baggage with some off-field stuff that always gets a little bit weird in there. I think both of those players, as just players, deserve it. They're both very good players. Carlos Beltran has some baggage too with being a part of the Astros and everything like that. I think Felix Hernandez needs to be like, that's a guy who I think is we're going to look back on that in 15, 20 years, and we're going to wonder why this guy didn't get in right away. Like, he was not as, he didn't have the longevity.
Of the vote. That thought it'd be higher.
Yeah, I mean, this is somebody who was just, his peak was as good as it gets. He fell off quick at the age of at the age of 28. He kind of fell off, and he didn't have the back half of a career that you kind of hope he would have. But he also, before his age, up to age 28, this was a guy who was already at 50 wins, like FR. 50 wins at the age of 28. This guy was an absolute beast. His peak was great. And I do think he's going to be one of these interesting cases where I think we're going to look back on it and we're going to realize, like, he's a great player. There are other players like Felix Hernandez in the Hall of Fame. Ralph Kiner is an outfielder with the Pirates who played in like the 40s. Again, short peak, but Kiner was
damn good.
It was damn good. Yeah. It was.
Did he have one or two Cy Youngs? I know he had one for sure. I'd put you on the spot. I can look it up too.
Felix, no, I've got it.
I feel like he had one, but he finished second like 2 or 3 times. Is that right?
He had one when he had the great ERA season. It was like 2014, I think he won it. But he didn't have the wins, right?
Here we go. One-time Cy Young Award winner, finished second twice. There's a 4th place finish in there as well.
It's phenomenal. I mean, you look at this, and from 2009 to 2014, we're talking what is that, a 6-season stretch. He had 6.9 FWAR, 6.7, 5.3, 6.6, 6.1, 5.6. That is absurd. If just looking right now, the highest FWAR anybody had last year from a pitcher was Tariq Skubal at 6.6. He was basically Tariq Skubal last year, 6 years in a row. Like
Crazy.
that's, I know he didn't have the longevity, and there's something about being available, and Craig Biggio's belong in the Hall of Fame too for playing forever in a year. But that 6-year peak is, you can't find many starting pitchers in the past 30 years who had a 6-year peak like Felix Hernandez did. And if that doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame, I don't know what does. I know he couldn't stay healthy. Pitching is hard. I would have voted for Felix Hernandez. I probably would have also voted for Chase Utley, second baseman. Those would have been like my two. Like I think that they should have gotten in, guys. I think they'll get in. I think they'll get in eventually. But those would have been like the two like big omissions on this ballot, at least for me. I'm here to understand arguments on like Cole Hamels. Like if you want to tell me that Cole Hamels belongs, I kind of believe it, but I'm also not going to stump for him like I would Felix Hernandez or like Chase Utley. I'll stump for those guys hard. I'd probably put Cole Hamels on a ballot, but if he didn't get in, I would say, I'm okay. I can hear an argument on that one. But for the amount of people who left Felix Hernandez and Chase Utley off, I just, I'm sorry, I'm going to disagree with you.
Well said, man. Well said. We'll end it on that. We'll jump back on sporadically throughout the offseason like we kind of have been, or when the Cubs maybe make another signing, whatever comes next. Certainly if it is a name like Zach Allen, that qualifies for us.
Yeah, we will be live.
Turning on the microphones and jumping on right away if we can. He is Jason Ross. I am Mitch Whitmire. This has been the Northside Baseball Podcast. We'll see you next time.